Welcome to Caffeinated Mornings, a show built around the idea of more conversation and less presentation. We dive deeper into discussions that go beyond the surface of the work. A big thank you to our sponsors who make this show possible. Today's episode is brought to you by the award-winning, strategically driven, independent, full-service agency TDA Boulder. And we can't forget Buck Ross Productions and Coop Studios for helping us capture and share this show with you. A special thanks to The Coffee Ride for keeping us caffeinated, and to Realtor Michelle Sander and the Zeal Group at RE/MAX, CMCI Studio, Snappy Little Numbers for our theme music, and Pro Photo Rental for their continued support. In this episode, we join everyone's favorite designer and host, Jay Farrakane, for heartfelt and intimate conversation with Tran Nguyen-Wills, mother, wife, entrepreneur, founder, creative director, and community builder, now working in public service. This talk covers her less than conventional path from beginning to present and the learning along the way. We'll also hear insights on why she does what she does and the impact she hopes to make on the issues she cares about so much. So get comfortable, get caffeinated, and get ready to be inspired and informed with our newest friend, Tran Nguyen-Wills. Let's go.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit because I'm going to do some setup. So a little bit about our guest today. Tran is a Denver native, daughter of Vietnamese refugees, a mom, a wife, of Josh Wills, multi-time caffeinated guest. He's in here somewhere. Also creative powerhouse himself. Tran is someone who's been shaping creative community and spaces for years. It's just kind of what I feel like I've always known you for. She's built everything from retail spaces and cafes to art galleries, and then most recently, prior to where we're going to go today, Base Coat, a multi-location, nationally acclaimed, non-toxic nail salon, and we will touch on that in just a minute. And honestly, her work has always gone far beyond business. Tran is now a deputy director of outreach for the city of Denver, and serves on the Commission of Cultural Affairs. And if I get any of that titling on your LinkedIn page wrong.
Okay.
But where she advocates for the representation and builds across connections across the city. And I think the one thing about Tran is her heart, her grit, and her creativity is always what I've known her for. And it's really interesting about how it's kind of like it paints your path that we'll talk a little bit about today, which proves that all paths to where you are at this moment in time aren't always straight or conventional or even kind of make sense from the outside. So let's get into it. I've known you, I think now, this is going to make me feel old, but I think I've known you and Josh for 15 years.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I've known you for all these projects and brands you've been working on. And I think regardless of all those titles or whatever you've held as you've built those things, I've always kind of just looked at you and your family as more of what I think I want Denver and all people to be, is that, you're creative, inspired, hardworking, and really caring about the people in your community. And I think that's what I've always put you in, is I just look at you as a community builder. But I want to kind of go back to the very basics of when you got started, and literally in the basement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then to cafes, art galleries, to nail shops. I feel like I got this insider armchair view of as that was happening. But take us back to the beginning and talk to a little bit about the starts of things.
I think it really started with, obviously, a little quick history. Josh and I, we met in high school. We became teenage parents really young. I think I had, we were 18 and 17 when we had our oldest. And I think we were always, Josh was really into graffiti and skateboard, and I was really into fashion and interior design, even at that time, not knowing what that was like. And I think, too, coming from, and I talk about this a lot in my story of parents coming to a country, not speaking the language, or, really having a place. And so even for me and Josh, that's kind of how we felt. We already made ourselves outsiders, being these teen parents at a time where, obviously it's very shunned upon being a teen parent in high school. And we really started to think about how we were using creativity and community. Those things I think we forget really come hand in hand. And And so when we, had our first kid and Josh was into, design school and I was at home, being a stay-at-home mom at the same time going to high school at the same time.
Right.
So my creative outlet was like making clothes because I actually learned that from growing up with my mom being a seamstress. When she came to the country, it was one of her trades that she learned. And so we started making things together, but really not having that outlet to like sell or really put those items anywhere for people to see. And so, that was kind of how we started making things together, kind of started creating our own community on our own. And I think that's something I think all of us probably feel sometimes when we're thinking of a product or a new or anything, or working for a brand that what is the need? And that was
What's
something,
the why?
yeah, what is the why? And why we did it was because there wasn't one. And we weren't really finding places or other people, and so that's kind of where Fabric Lab came out of, was, something Josh and I came together of like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sell clothes and be really DIY. And we were selling I think we sold, our first like test market was a Vans Warped Tour. We had no fucking business doing that, honestly. And we sold stuff and we're like, okay, well, people were buying it. And so we were like, okay, all right. And we are carrying our son with us and, and we were like, okay, let's try this out. And then we saw the market for it. People like, musicians were buying his like screen printed jackets that we're buying from like the thrift store. And then I was sewing like random like little skirts and dresses, and then he would, screen print on them. So we were really doing things with like nothing. We were just doing, he was working a lot and I was, doing odds and ends. And I ended up working at Buffalo Exchange of all places. I had friends there and they're like, well, come sell your stuff here. And so
you almost made like a mini store.
Yeah, like a mini store.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had like, but then our stuff was getting mixed in with like, fast fashion and vintage. And it wasn't really giving a place for local, makers, like we hear now, right? And that didn't really exist back then. There wasn't like a special place just for local makers, designers, and artists, and so Fabric Lab kind of was created from that. And then that's when our friend who owned a hair salon on East Colfax, which Josh and I at the time were like, why are, like now we think about like East Colfax during that time was kind of,
it was pretty raw.
It got a little stabby sometimes. and so, we would tell people, we started down in a basement in East Colfax, and we were not only selling our things, but, at the same time, we were meeting people at Buffalo Exchange. We're like, no, I want to come sell my stuff at your store. And then we started bringing in more people that were making things that were doing really rad things that we weren't, could never find. You couldn't find at a store like you do now, or where these, big stores are now carrying more independent brands and lines. And so we were kind of the first to do that in Denver.
And I feel like that those impacts, you guys kind of finding these like stabby areas.
Yep.
You almost like gave it a heart in some weird. I felt like every time I would come down and like see where the stores were or something like that, it was almost like a rejuvenation because there was just this spirit there.
And too, honestly, it was because rent was cheap.
Yeah.
And we don't think, that doesn't exist anymore, right?
Right.
And we were paying $200 to be in a basement on East Colfax, which seems fair market price, right? But like, but now those spaces are going for $3,000 a month.
Right.
And no, if I wanted to open business now, there's no way I could, right? And so we did that, but also we were really always mindful about the community too. Like gentrification is real, and even not even knowing the words back then, I knew what we could do can really do that too, and really push people out. And so even, so we were really always mindful of community, bringing community, but how thoughtful we could be about doing that. And so we made sure, we were having, events that were for everyone, right? And I remember we had, fashion shows and things like that. And we would, we probably should have had permits and things like that, but we didn't.
Yeah.
But we were doing it very this is how we create community. You invite everyone and see who shows up and comes. And
I think the beautiful part of it too is like there wasn't this notion we have to go ask for permission kind of thing. And I think a lot of people get kind of hung up in that. And I think that was one of the beautiful things as I watched you build those businesses. There wasn't a whole lot of I think in some weird ways, and this may be what made art more than design is that you're like, this is what we want to do. This is what we're feeling right now, or we're feeling our community needs. And it was interesting as I I want to take a little bit of a departure off of like, okay, cool. You guys are out like handcrafting these businesses from the ground up, and design and interiors and all these things kind of overlapping. I'm going to do a little bit of like a whiplashy sidebar fast forward thing, but you're in politics now. Like, how the hell does that happen from where you guys were? And in somewhere, I'm betting it's not any different, but it's different.
I think when I would tell people that was what I was doing, a lot of people were like, that makes sense. For me, it didn't, right? Because I was like, I'm a business owner, I'm a creator, I can do all these things, and how does politics play in that? And I realized, oh, it does. Because I think about all the people when we're opening these businesses that we're creating, all the new people we're meeting, like Todd and Lucian, like, you know, and so many friends in the community are literally because of the businesses that we had built. And just having that support system, right? And so those businesses that were built literally, you know, were obviously for us, it was something that we really needed at the time in Denver especially, right? There wasn't places for, you know, me and Josh consider us like eccentric weirdos and things like that. And that wasn't just, you know, and I thought about like the community that was kind of being left out. So we would bring in the barbers and the artists and and then community advocates. And those were part of the community is why we made it the way we did. You know what I mean? It wasn't leaving anyone out. And so I think leading me to today and all those businesses I built, at the core of it was always community. And I never really thought in the way until we sat down and I did the time. And I was like, oh, you know, Fabric Lab was to bring artists that were making stuff together.
Yep.
And then, you know, in a basement, Fabric Lab 2.0 became this place where we were showing art and on a bigger level and giving more people, uplifting more different communities and backgrounds from everyone, you know, from artists and musicians to fashion designers. And then when the shop opened, I don't know if many of you remember that, there was a cupcake and syrup bar, which people thought was...
But bookstore too.
And bookstore and
cool
design and
stuff,
art.
yeah.
And we were having monthly art shows and showing really diverse artists who actually have become really big artists now, right? And it's really cool to see. But that was kind of like how Josh and I were really good about bringing people along. We created it, but the idea was always to bring other people up with us. And so... And that's where I am now. You know, I did a design in these businesses in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like community design. Now I'm truly community designing in a different way, right? And I think too how we relate with government and design now, we don't think about it that way anymore, right? Like even now when I sit down and I design something, a flyer for a community meeting, I was like, is this readable? How is the design gonna look, right? And government is very sterile.
Yes.
And we know that, right? But like for me, like how am I going to get this information about this community meeting that will help this community about getting people housed in a different way? Okay, are we going to do, when we finally open it, you know, what is the activation? Well, I brought in artists to do the activation. I brought in designers to come in and help do the vinyl stickers for these very white shed looking, you know, housing units, right? And I was like, that's not, you know, just because they're unhoused, that doesn't mean that they don't deserve integrity and empathy and also coming to a place that feels like home.
Right.
So then I brought in, you know, when I was working at, you know, I had stores that I sold flowers and plants at, I would call them and be like, would you mind donating plants so we can put these in the tiny homes? And so that was just kind of like all these things I did brought me to a place where I can actually do something very important in community. Even it was very small to some people, but yeah.
I was so curious about like whether or not, and you just kind of beautifully unpacked that, but I was very curious if your design sensibility or what design means to you when you were running businesses, if it was any different. And I think you just kind of hint out into something that like, it's the context of it, right? But true to your character, I also think you've always kind of brought the vibe along, and more for the standpoint of not to be like, well, to make that those places feel welcome, which might not, you know. And it was funny you touched on this in the run into it, and I was like kind of curious around it, the P word, politics. Like it's kind of it's a real part of every brand or business, right? There is politics within those businesses. Why do you think it's such a bad word to use? Like at least I feel like it when people say, "Oh, politics in the public space," it has such a different like intention. Do you feel like when you use the word politics in your current role, is it a bad word? Do you feel, does it like have other people like dirtied the term for you?
I mean, as we know, there's always bad actors in
Yeah.
politics, but now being in it and being, I always joke around like I am a part of the man system now. Like, you know what I mean? It's
But it's
very odd.
subversive and punk at the same time because you're like, I'm in it now and I can mess with the system from the inside.
I am in it now, and it's been interesting to, I don't know if I was appointed in this role because I was, doing a lot of the creative work for the campaign, and you don't think about that in a way of like, how do we...
And this was with Leslie.
Yes, so we started with Leslie, so I started with her.
Leslie Herod running for office.
She ran for mayor, as well as like 100 people, like 1,000 people.
There was actually a lot.
There was a lot of people who ran for mayor in Denver. It was a fun time for sure. And, Leslie actually was really the person that really kind of honed in like what I could do. Because I was like, why are you asking me to join? If she was here, I would look at her right now like, what were you thinking? But it made sense. And she saw that where, politics and creativity, that's how you get people to understand your brand. That is the first, and we all know that in this room. Like, if you are a designer, that is how people really judge you on who you are, is who your brand right away. And how is your story being told? And so Leslie was our first one. Of course, I worked with Josh with it, and we were really trying to make sure that when we were designing her brand, it was really true to herself and how she wanted to be communicated to the community and how community to understand her. And I think we really brought that across. And I just learned like, oh, okay, this is how design creativity comes in right away. And then people understand about the politics of it all, right? And so then when she did lose her, during that time, she was amazing to support me. And then, joining now mayor office, and
because he must have recognized at some point, like there's
so he
some
saw
magic
the work
juju over there.
Doing the work there, and then he brought me on to help him when he was in the runoff. So then obviously all the work that we did with Josh and many other creatives, it wasn't just me. It was like bringing in like poets. It was bringing in musicians and things like that. How are we, these are the people who vote in politics. These are the people who are making art against things, and that's how we protest. And I think about all those things when I'm sitting down and really designing how I want community to look. Because at the end of the day, government is there, but we are this big ecosystem that we forget about. They are just part of that ecosystem, but all of us in this room, teachers, and we are the ones that actually make the system run. So when I sit down now in the job I am, I'm like, how does this affect everyone? Are we building it for them without their input, or are we actually building it with them? And so those are things I forgot in politics. People forget that's where we're in the position we are now, right? Is because people are doing things for us, and we lost our way. We lost our way of how we should be actually building together. When we design things, how are we actually working with that person? How are we working with the communities that's going to affect them? Is it going to affect them with food? Are we even addressing language justice? Are we even making things that are in the languages are in these communities? And so when I sit down and do that work now, whether it's an event, and right now, we'll dive in that. My work right now is preserving Little Saigon.
Right.
That has been neglected for decades.
Well, and giving that specific area, letting it keep its identity. I wanted to touch on one thing because I think this is going to lead into it. I think I mentioned this on our lead-up call, but Josh, your husband, who's a creative director himself, described you as a true creative director. And so I've met many entrepreneurs in my own career. I can kind of tell you what separates the good ones from the bad ones. And if you ask me, really good creative directors, they have this unique ability to kind of inspire and lead and rally people around their background to achieve a goal. So when I heard Josh say that about you, I see that. But what do you think he meant when he said that you're a true creative director? Do you see yourself as that?
Why did he say that?
I think it was very admirable because I think when
I guess in a way
you have a bigger vision than
I do, because I could see things from a different lens. Obviously, just my lived experience alone, right?
Yeah.
Coming from a background of, I think about refugees and communities right now.
I mean, you have such a connection to it.
Yeah, they come to this country not knowing, like I said, language, and they really create community to support them. That's the way they survive. That's the way they end up thriving, is because building community. So I guess for me, I've seen how my parents were, finding folks in their community to help them with projects or looking for jobs and things like
Connections, just getting established,
connections.
yeah.
And so I guess for me, I see it from a view of like, okay, we have a problem. What is this problem? And what is the why at the end? And what is our goal at the end of this, right? Who are we helping and who are we in turn can also harm? And so I think for me being a creative, I guess I just don't see myself that, but I guess creative directors are the ones that kind of drive projects and see where it can go, right? And I think for me, I do have those aspirations of like, oh, I know this will work.
Right.
If it doesn't, okay, we'll figure something else. I'm big fan of like, we fuck up, we're gonna have to learn from it, right? And
I think that is a key too, that like a repetitive theme when I often talk to people like you is it's not a fear of failure, but you also realize it's not the end.
Yeah,
too.
it's not
like,
the
and
end.
you're fine with it. Like, what can I learn from that?
And it's okay. We're human, and I like to, I am very type A. I can be very type A, but I'm learning to really let go, especially when you work. When it's a business, it's very different, right? You have a product, you have to sell, like Base Coat. Like, it was 10 years, 5 years of that was building a brand. It was building, like, how does this design look? Who are we talking to? Who is my, like, this niche kind of like, customer that I'm really looking to? And then how do I sell that brand to people, right? But then when you work with community, you have to let go of that because different personalities and the wants and needs and communities looks very different than like a customer.
Yeah.
It does. But then at the end of the day, it's the same. It's like how you communicate with them is very similar as well. So.
Well, and I think that was the point I was like very curious about because like in our lead up to this, we talked a lot about like building brands like Base Coat and stuff like that. And like I'm always curious, do you see building a brand on the commerce side? Do you see building a brand and a business as separate efforts, or are they one and the same?
I think they are different because a brand is a way you story tell whoever you are, who is the person selling this brand, whereas the business, you are running it for efficiency and making money. So I do see it in a way, two different things. By the day, they have to work. Like both can be true, right? And so for me, when I was building Base Coat, I was like, what is the story I'm trying to tell? Because a nail polish is nothing different, right? It's not like I'm reinventing what nail polish looks like or how you apply it or anything like that. It was just like, how am I going to make it different from, other stories of like a big brand like OPI or something like that. Whereas Base Coat is truly like, how are we, people forget that it was a social justice brand in a way too. Because at the end of the day, I was like, how are we talking about this brand? Who are we helping? So I talked about really hard things like wage theft, trafficking,
health conditions
and safety. And those are things that people really didn't think about when they were thinking about a beauty product. And so I really, in a way tapped into that because there was a time when people were buying like $20 fucking juices. And I was like, okay, well, I think people are really worried about what they put in their body, but the fact that weren't thinking about what we were putting on our body was just as important. And that was something that I really drove through with Base Coat. And that 5 years was really like working with Josh and our business partners at that time, really trying to hone in on what that story was to make sure that, and also keeping in line with the values that I had too was really hard, especially really hard than when we were, approached by Nordstrom's, and we'll dive deep in that one, I guess, too, here soon. But, I had to really let go of some things, but there was some things I was like, this is really non-negotiable at this, like as a small brand, I'm not going to harm people because you need more product and things like that, yeah.
I thought that was the most interesting thing because I think, when we think about government, it's really about like making choices, considering those that are within your constituency and that kind of stuff. And I think during Base Coat, you built this entire brand really around, you said it was kind of a social justice. That's all really, it was ethical ideas were really what were driving that. And I think the interesting thing for me about Base Coat and kind of as we've been talking about it was thinking that you were making product choices or trying to help the public at large understand like, you all are using this stuff, but there's no standard set for it. So I'm going to kind of set those. But again, that's a very community DIY, punk rock, whatever it is, I'm going to build the thing that I believe in.
Yeah.
I think you had a personal relationship to why you did base coat. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, you hinted at it, the wage theft.
Also, Happy Asian Heritage Month.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you
and
for
I hope you
the snacks up here, by the way.
But that kind of falls into it. So nail industry is a big part of the Vietnamese community. It was after the war. It was the reason why so many people own nail salons or work in nail salons, and my mom, my family members. And so I wasn't really new to it, right? I just didn't personally do it, but I knew an auntie that had a nail salon, or my own mom who still works at a nail salon. And so that was kind of like me just saying, like, I'm not trying to reinvent this system, but I am a way of like knowing that, you know, there is exploitation happening in this world of this business. And so that was kind of my closeness to it. And then how can I change it and how people think about when they get a service? You know, that was one thing. It was like, okay, you know, I think a lot of people were used to getting like manis for like $12. But when you break down a cost, it should actually have been $40. You know what I mean? And I still break that down to people like, well, the reason why is like, it's not just the product. It's like, are we paying them? Paying people a wage that is livable? Is it obviously providing healthcare and time off and things like that? And that is very new to the nail industry, like of the last 5 years. No nail salon had those things. And so I really wanted to create where base coat would be that place and for people to learn. And I still, to this day, have nail salons who call and ask, you know, how much I should be charging and what are the, you know, the things I should be considering to make sure that my staff is, you know, have a survivable, livable wage. And they're not working 12, 13 hours like my mom was and aunts. You know, they were actually taking an hour off and going to bathroom breaks and things like that.
Getting out of some of the
getting out of those habits. Because no one, right now, to this day, a lot of these beauty products aren't still regulated.
Right.
So like when we talk about that, I regulated myself.
Which I think is so cool.
Yeah.
And it's reflective of your kind of like ethics too. And like, I want this to all be better.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, you know, I hope that these other nail salons who are now, you know, non-toxic, it was because of base coat.
Yeah.
And then that's something I'm really proud of, to at least left behind, even though base coat doesn't exist anymore. I still think about, you know, people still reach out, or, you know, many brands are very similar to base coat now. And that's something we should be doing, right? And so, you know, base coat has become that kind of, you know, I can't believe I had it for 11 years some days. You know, I think about that, of like how far it went. And then, you know, obviously COVID changed that.
Yep.
COVID was definitely an eye-opener of being a business where you couldn't be to go, or, you know, you're sitting 2 inches away from someone's face. You couldn't distance yourself 6 feet.
It really hit that industry.
So when people ask, like, what happened to base coat, there was many things, but also I really had some health issues going at that time, where I did almost pass away. And, you know, that was kind of one of the eye-openers of like, oh, if I don't, you know, it's not a wake-up call, then there's something terribly wrong with me. Because during COVID, I was learning how to like, make mani kits to go. I can do to go. And then
you were adapting.
I was adapting to a new landscape of our world. And I know businesses are still struggling from that. But also, too, it was like, you know, I don't think many people know I really fought for fighting, you know, for PPP loans for not just my salon, but other small businesses that were struggling, that were BIPOC owned, or were being left out of the conversations and the loans and vaccines and things that were happening at that time. So again, you know, at that time I was doing community fridges and things like that. Just again,
it went so far beyond
a nail salon.
I think one thing that is interesting about the base coat story, and for all creatives to take away, is that it's very easy for us to be swept up in the momentum of our whatever we're currently on, or the lack of that momentum sometimes can be really damaging too. But for you to make the choice of recognizing the call, I think was probably like, it's a very hard choice, right? At some point you're like, what matters more here? And I'm so thankful that you chose like,
I mean,
you matter more than some brand.
And it was a rough time for sure with base coat, because we were at a trajectory of making a lot of money right before COVID hit.
Yeah.
We were finally hitting our stride. And finally, like, you know, at that time I had 13 locations. 5 were mine, and the rest were in Nordstrom's. And we were really at a place where I was going to be okay finally, because, you know, before that, I wasn't paying myself. And people know that as a business. Like 5 years, 6 years and not paying yourself is rough.
Yeah.
And takes a toll on your partner and your life and things like that. And so when COVID hit, I was just like, oh, this is new.
Is this the signal?
Is this a signal?
Yeah.
And, too, I think was just learning that, I don't think people know, too, I was able to pay all my staff throughout the country the whole time because I quit paying myself.
Well, you care, but I think
but that was just who I was because I wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And I was okay. We were okay. You know what I mean? I had, my health-ish, but at the end of the day, I was like, I got to make sure everyone's okay out of this. And also, we were so left behind because right then was the restaurant business and the industry was getting a lot of
Hammered
the love.
too, yeah.
But they were getting the most love and resources and just anything, just even basic communication of how to apply for a loan. So during that, I took that on, you know what I mean? And, and I think a lot of people noticed that of how this tiny little nail salon was doing these big things. And I think about that now because at the time I wasn't thinking that. I was just
Right.
I'm here, I'm seeing a need in our communities where I have base coats. Because also I was I was in a lot of areas that were new and upcoming.
Yes.
Well, on the verge of being gentrified. And so it's like, okay, well, how am I going to help a lot of these community members who live in these neighborhoods at the same time while I'm trying to run a business and make sure that staff is okay and make sure my own family is okay. That was a wild time.
Well, and to that notion of revitalization versus gentrification and stuff, Denver has grown so much in the past, just few years. I think you even said on our lead up call to this that you were you and Josh were standing somewhere in town and you're it's so different, but it's also kind of so the same. And it's interesting to me as you've kind of not left the business world, but you're taking that empathy out into these kind of, you're just redirecting that empathy and understanding. And it's so funny that even just what you told us about base coat, it shows how much you literally care for all those around you. And I think that I've often joked that the most creative people I know are somewhat ridiculously responsible to a default, right? We want to take care of others more than somewhat ourselves. And it's awesome that you're you balance that or trying to, right? That's all we can do. What did you mean though by that it's changed so much? The town of Denver has changed so much, but it's also kind of the same.
I think we were on Walton Street, right? We were on Walton Street and that's a neighborhood I actually grew up in too as well. And our kids also grew up. And we were driving down, there's these giant, giant buildings, and I got lost. I was no idea where I'm at. And I was just this is insane, right? This is just kind of wild how fast this city is growing. But then now working in government, how much it has harmed people to not able to live in those communities. And so that change has definitely made me be aware of the work I have to do with obviously an amazing team where I work alongside at the mayor's office. Growth is needed because that's how a thriving city grows.
But the challenge is holding on to the identity, right?
Holding on to identity and making sure that the people who created that community also stay in the community. And so I talk a lot about and do a lot of work on placemaking and how we make sure, yes, growth is going to happen, gentrification is going to happen, all these things have to happen because that's just how cities grow. But at the same time, how can we also, in a way, help slow it down to make sure that everyone that should be in those communities stay in those communities?
Right.
And so I think that's where, the change for me has been difficult. But I think I'm finally starting to realize how much there are people in the community who want to help with that work, right? And is it a nonprofit? Is it just normal person that's your neighbor that's willing to help make those changes? But for me, it's always been how do we slow it down? We're not going to stop it. I always try to tell people because I'm a big, favor of gentrification is just what it is right now, and it's happening all over the country. And I see it. I talk to folks. But it's how can we figure out how to slow it down? And I'm working on how to do that with actual community members and with the city, right, as well. So
is that some of the reconciliation that how you manage gentrification versus revitalization, which kind of they might seem similar, but they're actually pretty different,
Yeah.
right? Is it just And is it technically slowing it down? Because like we know that I always feel like that's what government's super good at is slowing things down.
Yeah.
But like in a way, but maybe some of that stopping and pausing is kind of like some of the things that you're bringing.
And we have to. And here's, for example, Little Saigon is kind of one of the most untouched neighborhoods right now in Denver. And so right now we are dealing with a transition. Was it the RTD? It's the RTD BRT situation happening. You guys already probably see it when you've probably been downtown in Colfax. That is what's going to happen there. But when that happens, guess what happens? Developers come through and they start saying, oh, there's a train station coming through. This is an opportunity to buy up land and build more ugly apartments, in a community that has been really untouched in a way where there's still mom and pop shops. There are still folks who are working hard to keep the community the way it is. And for me, it's not just about pretty banners and planters. Those are needed because those are what more of the well-off communities have right now, and that's what the communities ask for. But like at the end of the day, too, there are needs where things I'm working on now is like how do we create like a little Saigon Community Resource Center that the neighborhood has asked for. There's ways of placekeeping and growth at the same time there where I'm like, okay, we have to figure this out. And like you said, government is really great at slowing things down. But when you have community asking for it, and I always advocate, like, go to those meetings. They sometimes suck, those meetings where people just get yelled at. But when you're not in those rooms, those are people making decisions for you, for your community and your family that usually isn't aligned with what you believe in. So my job now is like, I know I'm not going to be at the mayor's office forever. How do I give the community the tools they need? So community tools, what I mean is like, how do they advocate for themselves when a big developer comes in? How do they advocate for themselves when they need a new street light? Like those are things that I think we forget is like, at the end of the day, government can only help us so much. And we all know that.
And then they need to help themselves. And I think that's the interesting thing to me, back to like brands and businesses and not seeing such a big difference between them anymore, at least the way that you're kind of doing politics or your participation in government and community. I think that was one of the things that I thought was remarkable when you were telling me like, yeah, sometimes it's like even how we ask the questions of things like that. It took me back to like how I run like brand workshops and stuff like that. You have to like get that info out. And I think the misbelief sometimes of like DIY is you do it all alone. And I don't think that is the truth. Like it feels like that you really rally the people that are in those spaces and kind of, like you said, give them the best tools that they can.
Yeah. And the rallying community, but now working in government, I think if you haven't met me yet, I like to rock the boat a lot. And so sometimes when you bust into a new administration, folks aren't fond of that.
Right.
And I'm a big asker of like, why? Why can't we do this? Well, we always, or why are we doing it this way? Well, we've always been doing this. I'm like, well, that's the problem. Because we're not used to, a lot of times government is not used to change, nor want to change, and want to stick to the way we are. And that's why we're in the positions we are now. And, where city is slow, you know what I mean? And I'm really thankful to have a mayor and working with a team that also feel the same way. And I think because I was, I'm really thankful I was hired to do that, but you have to advocate for yourself. And I'm a big, obviously will always scream that at the top of my lungs, but that is the reason why I am able to even do the work that I do now, right? And I think a lot of folks are like, the city is now like, the people I work with that have been in the city for 30 or something years are now seeing like, oh, things can be different. And so I hope, even if, I'm no longer in this position and that people start thinking about government a different way. And my job too, as well as not, working on preservations of, parts of our city, but also like how are we just even alone making sure like, we are bringing community along with us when it's time. And are we designing things around what they want?
Well, and we touched on this too, like the notion of like, you've used the word design a bunch of times. And this is why I was so excited about you coming and talking, and not that you don't have like visual work to show, but I do think you're a designer in a way because of like, this is big D design though, right? Like this is planning, structure, solving problems. And I love that notion that when you were saying that like, you ask why. And that's like one of the key ingredients, if you ask me, in design is like, but it's big D what you're doing and bringing that into a community. Do you feel like you've and we joked that government tends to run slow, but do you think some of your practices and running businesses yourself, there's a nimbleness that has to be built into those things because you're reacting and stuff? Do you feel like you've increased any efficiencies there or slid things through because of like your background?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, just because at the end of the day, we have, like for me, bringing other community members in the work that I was doing because of all, leading up to where I am, from having these art shows and pop-ups and nail salons. So I can read architectural plans. I can do a construction site. I can build a brand from the start up. I can do those things happen in the city. So I've all those things now that I am very aware of now, where it's like there are ways we can make this more efficient in the city. There is no reason it takes 20 steps to approve a sign for a business.
Right.
And now they can't open their fucking business because we take so long just approving the weight of a sign or the look of a sign. It's just, stopping those things and asking them, why does this take so long? Because, I deal with a lot of permitting because, business owners will reach out, be like, the reason I can't open right now is because of something that's happening in the city that takes so long. There's so many different layers that has to go through, and slowly we're removing those barriers.
That's awesome, yeah.
And those are barriers, right, for a business owner. And at the end of the day, it is so harmful to the city now. It's like, well, the slower you open this business, you're not getting that tax money.
Right.
Like, are you not, just trying to understand that loop?
Well, when you
that
put it back
people
in
don't
that
understand.
context of them, all of a sudden there can be some again, momentum that's going to be like, okay, cool, maybe we actually like listen to this one.
Right.
So, all right, I want to take you into not a mood lightener because this hasn't been heavy, but like a little bit of fun time with you. So I'm going to kind of throw you just some words at you. I'm going to see what they mean. There's usually a choice in there, so strap in. Here we go.
Okay.
Rules or reinvention?
Reinvention.
DIY or delegate?
DIY forever.
Interesting. Within DIY, do you ever find delegation? Like, hey, we're going to get this group together or is it no? Get the hell out of the way. I got this.
Get the hell out of the way, but also I think you have to DIY to get to delegation, because how are you going to else know what you're going to do? I guess have a plan, because DIY for me has always been like, do it, see how it goes,
and adapt.
Yeah. Where is it not going to work, and then you delegate.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And there's no right or wrong. Well,
Okay.
maybe there is wrong. That's community or individualism. I know this one.
Yeah, community always.
Color or composition.
Color. As someone who only likes black for everything, I do love color.
And so that is, again, back to design, and that's
Yeah.
more that is a common designer trait.
Okay.
Like, look at Todd and Lucian.
I know.
Yeah.
Always.
Empathy or efficiency.
Empathy.
Improvise or plan. Yes is a
Improvise.
fine answer sometimes too.
Both?
Yeah. I think you can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually think a lot of good creative comes out of improvisational planning, if you will. You have to have some structure, at least, I think, in my mind. Small moments or big vision?
I would say big vision. Because that's the only way to solve problems, I think, sometimes. But then you have to start off small. So that's you have to start off small to get to that big vision.
The reason I asked that one is I feel like a lot of times, in all creative projects, there's this moment of like, it seems momentum is our theme today, that we tend to not look back at the mini achievements it took a long way. And I don't know, there's a quote I hate by some big business founder that said, celebrate for a minute and move on. And I'm like, no, dude, you should hang out there and be like fucking stoked on what you did. So anyway.
Yeah.
Build from scratch or restore?
Dang, these are hard. Build from scratch. I think that's always something that I've been really good at doing.
But in that, and
But
maybe
then-
this is the way that it's phrased, but like if we think about revitalization, is it build new?
No.
Or is it restore?
Restore.
Yeah, because we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
like finding those
Because
imperfect things.
because like I'm looking at having our real estate help me look for a space so that we can open kind of our first Little Saigon Resource Center. So it's like finding a building. I don't want to start from scratch. We have so many buildings that we can just renovate and not disrupt, and I think about
Right.
sustainability and like throwing more shit into the landfill, like trying to avoid those things. So yeah, so let's restore, rebuild, but there's sometimes where you have to literally tear things down and start over.
And I think it's
I'm
case
a firm
by
believer
case.
sometimes like burn it down and then let's start over too. So that's a hard one.
But I think it opened up
Yeah.
the it's not simple,
Yeah.
right, ever. And I don't know if there's ever one answer for anything.
Right.
Transparent or tactful?
Transparent. You have to be honest. And
That is not surprising to me,
Yeah.
by the way. Because I think that we do get in these tendencies of like, oh, I am going to hurt their feelings when I tell them this. And sometimes it can be so liberating to just be like, hey, look, this is going to be hurt. This might hurt, but I think we'll get to somewhere faster afterwards.
And I always use, this is kind of one of my oldest favorite saying, and some people might think it's a little harsh, but it's like, may the bridges you burn light the way. And I really took that to heart, I think, because sometimes you have to burn bridges, things that are not serving you anymore, whether it's in your job, your health, your family. And as soon as I take that with me, I'm like, oh, things open up and more clarity after that.
I've always loved that quote, and I dwelled on it for a really long
Yeah.
time at one point, and I realized, may the bridges you burn light your way. It's about looking backwards, because you should look back at the mess of burnt bridges, and if they're still glowing embers,
Yeah.
it kind of paints the path of like how you got to where you got to, and it's a reminder, if
Yeah.
anything, right? I think that's one of my favorite phrases. Preserve or progress?
Preserve leads to progress. Always. I think
so too.
That's the only way we can change the world we want to live in. Because we don't preserve the things we do now. For me, it's what's the point,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well, and it's what are we fighting to
Yeah.
save too? Quiet strength or vocal leadership? How do you see yourself?
I feel like I'm both.
I think so too. I think so too.
I'm quiet in very methodical ways. I think about the world and how I, see it. But for sure, I'm the one that's the loudest when it needs to be, especially fighting for other people or things that I believe in. And so I think both for me.
Last one.
Yeah.
Rapid action or slow burn?
Dang. I feel like both of all this could be
There's a lot of yeses in this one.
Yeah, it's very,
I feel like the stories you've told about the way that you're working in government now and city and community, there has been these more like quicker steps, at least than would happen through conventional channels. But like maybe
for me, slow burn needs to happen sometimes. But change, unfortunately, has to happen quick, too, at the same time. But you have to really be slow and steady with it, too. And if you're not, that's where a lot of things bad can happen. Who are you harming in that path if you go at a rapid pace, too?
right.
So I have to be really in the work I do is a slow burn, being really thoughtful about how we, move in this world. Because we see what happens when it's rapid and fast. It can destroy and just really destruct everything in your path at the same time. And so I really try to avoid that. So I guess sometimes rapid has to happen, but if we can be in a way of that slow burn to make sure
I think that's all like creative people, entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
makers. Our dream is slow burn,
Yeah.
but it feels like we live a lot of our life in
the rapid,
rapid reaction. And I think that is this funny balance of how do we start to manage I think it comes back to being creative director though. You have to have some sort of underlying plan to hinge it off of. And that's kind of your delta. So
Yeah.
anyway, so we've talked a lot about your beginning, your background, where you're at today. We hinted at this a little bit when we were kind of doing the lead up, but where do you see your like creative and civic career 5 years from now?
I think I want.
Are you mayor?
No.
Are you the mayor?
No.
Okay. You're like, I don't want that shit. That's terrible.
I do. I think all the things that led up to where I am today, I have a lot of learning still to do. And I think we, especially as women and women of color, are really hard on ourselves with that. And I say that because I do want to run for office one day. What, where, how, when, I don't know. But then you see people who just run for office willy-nilly with no
Right.
business running.
Yes, this has happened a number of times.
And so I look at that, and I'm like, well, if someone who's just been in community, who has that experience, and who is doing things that change at a small little level, I think, and helping people where I can. And I think I have a hard time because I want to help everyone.
Right.
I've had to let that go. That I have to help people. Well, I made my goal, I have to help someone once a day. And I have stuck with that since I especially joined office with the administration. And when I want to say I want to run for office, that's hard because a lot of times when you run for office, it looks different. You can't help at a level that you want to.
Right.
Whereas if I just stay and doing what I am I more impactful? And so I'm really struggling with that, right? Because I feel like running for office, I can really change things. And I think all of us can believe that if you were thinking about it.
Right.
But there's the politics. There's the do's and do nots you can't do. And there's I'm like, and then there's where it's like, if I just keep what I'm doing now, can I be more impactful in my community? And so that is my plan, is to try to figure that out, right? Like, I'm thinking about, city council for Denver, because there's actually never been an Asian person ever on city council.
Really?
Never.
Huh.
And so, and I don't have to be the first,
Right.
but I'd like to have someone
Right.
to represent that looks like me in these communities, right? And so that's where I'm struggling with right now, because I feel like I am more impactful outside of that. Because once you hit office or any kind, you're just limited.
Right.
And I don't like to be limited to things, if you can tell.
Yeah,
Like,
I
don't
can tell. I can
like no. And if I get a no, why? And why can't we do it this way?
tell. Right.
There's always an answer, and I will get that out of you, right? And then we're gonna also work together to get to that place. Because I know now, and especially when you're a business owner, sometimes I forget, I was doing a lot of stuff on my own, and I was thankful to have Josh and a really great team, but a lot of those I think we don't talk about is like business ownership or being an artist and creative can be very isolating sometimes. Because it's hard to find people who are kind of, in that same world sphere to find and connect with. And that's something now I try to remind people, like find people in your community that are aligned with what you do. They don't have to be in the same path of a business owner or
Right.
creative, but just really align with you as a person. And so now, where I'm at now is like, I have to ask for help for a lot of this work that I'm doing now in the city. Because now all those things I did in isolation, I have this bigger kind of team of people who want the same thing now on a city level in government. That really, as someone who was very anti-government, joining government,
Right.
realizing, there's people here who actually want to help and make change. Those are the people I'm finding where I am to help me do it. There are people that won't, but there's people really in the city that really do want to help people. So I'm just finding that support system to help me move the work that we need to move now. So that because Little Saigon, I don't know if you guys know, 17 years ago, they actually tried to make it a cultural district. It stopped because administrations changed. And that's what I mean.
And it lost
it's lost. It got lost for 17 years, and why it never became a true cultural district, like other districts in the city. And so that's why now I'm like, I can't let that happen. How do we make sure the community now can advocate for themselves so another 17 years doesn't go by where they don't find ways to fight for things that they want in their community? So, just those little things and finding people in the city has been super helpful that are aligned with what I believe in. Has been, Long story short, yes, one day I'll run for president, maybe. I would love to, but I would love to, on a local level, do something for sure.
with all the work you've done in all the businesses you've built and now being in government, does success look, do you define success differently? Do you see it as like, is there a different end goal? Maybe give us a little insight on that.
Well, when you run a business, it's,
How much money is in the bank?
money.
People, yeah.
And here is, how are we helping people in the community to be okay? How are we giving them, as simple as like, I deal with like, again, I said like a lot of business owners, right? That are struggling. A lot of times they don't speak the language as well. And how are we making sure like we're giving them information in their language so they can sign for a license and things like that. Success for me is that. Success is that I get that, help get that business open. Success is someone asking for a resource for rental assistance. That is success to me now. Last year, we were able to house 1,000 people in Denver. That was success for me. And it was not just me, it was tons of people who made that happen. But I was thankful to be part of it because at the end was where that creative mind came in of creating that space to welcome all those people into their new home. That is success now, for me.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing all this with us today. Excellent job.